Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves, world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia Studios. It is a Sunday. Happy Father's Day first and foremost to all the dads out there. Hopefully you have been having yourselves quite a Sunday, spending time doing whatever it is you enjoy doing this weekend, whatever it is that you enjoy doing on this day that is all yours, making it, I guess, maybe a little bit different than the other 364 days out of most years, but either way, hope it has been fun. Hope it has been filled with family and good times and just all the things you want to fill it up with. Unfortunately, as we get started talking about what's going on with the Atlanta Braves and what's going on across Major League Baseball as well, we don't get to come into the Sunday show on a winning note. And I didn't prepare for this yet, so I'm probably going to spend some time looking and digging through it. But I feel like I have come in here after some losses on some Sundays that have been of the unfun variety, and you could certainly put what happened between the Braves and the Rockies this afternoon at Truist Park in that column as well. A 10-1 defeat to a team that is, let's just go ahead and put this out there, historically bad. But I guess you have to file it under broken clock or blind squirrel or whatever you want to. But while the Braves did take the series from the Rockies, it still feels like they left something on the table by losing a game in which you got an outstanding pitching performance from Grant Holmes, who we will certainly get to as the show goes on. But long story short, 15 strikeouts for Grant Holmes this afternoon. What a performance in what amounted to 6 1/3 innings. It felt like just about every single hitter that went up there was making a U-turn at home plate, swinging and missing at what I thought was maybe his best slider of the season. But the slider-fastball combination, long story short, was all he needed, really, to take care of the Rockies and to limit them for the most part. Ran into some trouble a couple of times, but 2 hits, 2 earned runs, 3 runs allowed overall. He had a throwing error on a bunt attempt that was the first run of the game, and that really seemed like you were looking at it thinking, all right, we've been down this road a few times where the Braves offense struggles to score, even if they've had a day or two or a good series in which the runs have been there. They weren't there on this Sunday, so even though Grant Holmes only allowed the 2 runs, earned runs that is, 3 overall in 6 1/3 innings, and struck out 15 men against just 2 walks, he was saddled with a tough luck loss and drops to 3-6 on the year. And I've talked a lot about Grant Holmes, and I know we'll get to it a little bit later on in the show as well, but just kind of wanted to open up with what was a definite highlight on a forgettable day for the Braves at Truist Park. It seems like he's pitched better than both the ERA and certainly the record this year. But I think the record is indicative, obviously, of the kind of run support that you get. And while it's easy to look at the 10 runs that the Rockies piled up and kind of wonder, all right, well, how much of that was the responsibility of the guy who pitched into the 7th inning? Very little of that, as a matter of fact. Enyel De Los Santos, who had been pitching well over the last 3 or 4 weeks, finally had himself a bad day. He did not record an out and was charged with 4 earned runs. And Jose Ruiz had some issues. He has not really been sharp since coming over to the Braves. And then Aaron Bummer had to throw a couple of outs to close things out before Luke Williams. Yes, that Luke Williams, backup infielder Luke Williams, was the position player who closed out the day with a scoreless inning, no less. So just not the day that the Braves were looking for, certainly. And I don't want to, what's the phrase here? Throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that's one that has been used. I don't know. Can we still use that in 2025? Is that not offend somebody somewhere? Probably. But either way, this was a series win for the Braves. They have now won back-to-back series. And I don't want to get on here and say, well, all is well, because I don't think that all is well quite yet. I think that the Braves are making strides, and they're certainly, by winning series, doing what they need to do. But when you face a club as bad as the Colorado Rockies are and have been and certainly will be going forward, You just kind of wonder, every one of these kind of games you lose to this kind of team, is that going to be one that you just want back? And the answer, of course, to that is yes. That's a rhetorical question. We do those from time to time. This was just not the day for the Braves to close out the sweep that they very much needed to springboard themselves into what we will be talking about a lot on the show, is what I am calling, and I wrote about this week for the Marietta Daily Journal as well, a critical string of baseball that is ahead for the Braves. Let me say that again. A critical string of baseball, a stretch of games, 13 in a row against National League East opponents, and 10 of those are the New York Mets and the Philadelphia Phillies. So if you want to make any kind of noise in the division race, yeah, I guess maybe that's a secondary goal, but if you want to make a run back towards 500, you're going to have to do it by beating up on a team that has very much looked like it is rolling this year here in the early going. That's the New York Mets, best record in the National League. Those New York Mets. I didn't know that was going to be a thing this year, but obviously they have played some pretty good baseball. And then the Philadelphia Phillies, who, at least of late, have kind of found themselves on the struggle bus as well. They have not had a very good, certainly didn't have a very good month of May, and have not been playing up to their capabilities the way that they were in the month of April. So the Mets have really been able to open up this division and pretty much run away, certainly from the Braves, but really from the field. Because if you look at these standings, and now we've gotten to the point where we're well past Memorial Day. We're closing in on July, which means we're closing in on the All-Star break, which means right after that, and we'll go through these checkpoints, you get to the trade deadline, and I'm going to ask this later in the show as well. What Braves team is going to show up to the time where those decisions are going to be made for the trade deadline? Like, where are they going to be at that time? And in this next 13 games, let me just point this out, 7 of which against the New York Mets, with 3 starting at Truist Park this week. Where are you going to be in the head-to-head battles against those two teams, the Mets and the Phillies, those being, and you can't really overlook the Marlins either. Let's just go ahead and lump them all in there. You can't overlook anybody right now. But where are the Braves going to be when you turn the calendar to the month of July? Because that really is going to inform the kind of decisions that Alex Anthopoulos is going to make, or in some cases maybe not make. And I don't expect the Braves to be a club that's just going to start unloading players because they've had a bad year. And to this point, it has certainly not been the year that they wanted to. But they've got to figure out who they are and what they are, and the clock has been ticking. Clock's been ticking for a while for this team. That climb back up to 500 that might have had the Braves feeling like, okay, we're finally getting some things settled. Then you lose 6 consecutive series. Break that streak against the Milwaukee Brewers. You take 2 out of 3 against the Colorado Rockies. And I don't want to be all doom and gloom after the Braves just won another series, but what does it really prove to just beat the Rockies? They're a club that's been swept in a 3-game series 11 times this year. The Braves have played the Rockies twice, have been in position to sweep twice, and have lost games in which they got the pitching performance that they needed, at least from their starter. Obviously, a 10-1 game doesn't look too great. But losing, a 2-1 game in the finale against Colorado with Chris Sale on the mound the last time these two clubs faced. Those are just a couple of the many games that the Braves probably would file under, you'd like to have those back. You'd like to have those to do over again. But it doesn't work that way. You just keep pulling days off the calendar and then turning the calendar 1 month at a time. And the next thing you know, you end up in a position where if you are Atlanta and you played game number 70 today, you find yourselves 8 games under 500. You find yourselves 13 games back in the National League East race. And you look in the wild card, you're 7.5 games back. That's still manageable. Let's go ahead and point that out. And we'll talk about, a lot of the things that need to happen for the Braves over the next, especially couple of weeks. But in the run-up to, let's say, the All-Star break, and let's, of course, say the trade deadline, where can this Braves team be? Because if they're at 500, that's a different set of scenarios. If they're still 8 games under, I think at that point, there's really not a whole lot you can do over the final couple of months other than if you're the praying type. And if you have been already, I'm sure they appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody does. But it's just not looking too great overall. And that's just the big picture. But winning series, they're going to have to continue to do that because there are only 4 teams in the entire National League that have a worse record than the Braves. That would be the Washington Nationals, the Miami Marlins, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and yes, those Colorado Rockies who handed the Braves a 10-1 defeat on a Father's Day Sunday at Truist Park. Just not what you were looking for, to say the very least. But there were some signs in this series, some reminders of the capabilities of certain Braves that you definitely needed to see. Maybe none bigger than Spencer Strider and what he did on Saturday with a vintage Spencer Strider performance that we'll certainly talk about as we continue, and the one-man warpath that Ronald Acuna Jr. has been on because he has looked terrific. And I asked this on social media. I said, what version of Ronald Acuna Jr. are we getting back? I think we know now. I think it's been confirmed, double confirmed, and stamped, and notarized, and all those things. Ronald's playing like a superstar. But what else is happening in the Braves lineup? Consistently inconsistent remains the theme for this club. But back-to-back series wins, certainly something to build on, but a big test awaits the Braves as they're going to have a showdown with the New York Mets for 3 games coming up. And then they're going to face the Marlins, then the Mets, then the Phillies. It's a big, pivotal stretch of games ahead for this Braves team. So we do have a lot to talk about when it comes to the goings-on for the Braves, the current state of the team. We'll get into that in This Week in Braves Baseball. The good, the bad, the ugly, and I guess everything in between, most certainly. Just how good has Ronald Acuna Jr. been? Spencer Strider's Saturday performance, a couple of highlights for this team. What does that signal for the rotation if Strider is back? And I'll be joined by some special guests. Mike Ferrin of Sirius XM MLB Network Radio will help me take a trip around the big leagues, and it's Father's Day, so I'll be joined by Fred McAuley for a chat about baseball between father and son. That's coming your way as we continue on From the Diamond. This Week in Braves Baseball is up next. I am Grant McAuley. This is From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back in to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. Live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday here in Midtown as we discuss the goings-on for the Braves in This Week in Braves Baseball. Before I get too far into the show, because I know I just launched right into it, as the Braves had a disappointing Sunday and closed out a series win over the Rockies with a 10-1 loss. But I want to remind you, as always, you can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. You can also find it on the Odyssey app if you want to be part of the conversation on days beyond just Sunday from 5 to 7 when I'm normally on. You can find me on social media at Grant McAuley on most platforms. So go ahead and follow along there as well. You can find the show at From the Diamond with an underscore on X and at From the Diamond on Instagram if you'd like to check those things out as well. But let's check out some of the goings-on for the Braves this week in Braves baseball. They had to shake off that sweep in San Francisco because their road trip was just more of the same from what we had been experiencing. So when last we met here on the show, about 7 days ago, the Braves were still looking to find some momentum. And I think they found a little bit in Milwaukee. They started to look a little bit more like that team that could certainly hang with another club, as far as a contender, I mean. Now, you got to handle business against the Rockies, and a series win is a series win. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. I'm just saying that there was more to be had for the Braves this weekend, and I don't think anybody is looking at that really any other way, especially when you get 15 strikeouts and 6 1/3 strong innings from Grant Holmes against one of the worst teams in baseball history. You'd like to think you could win that game, but unfortunately, the Braves did not. But the San Francisco series felt like a new low. And that's saying a lot because the Arizona loss in the finale of that series when the Braves coughed up a, 6-run lead in the ninth inning, that one was going to sting for a while. Then you lose on a wild pitch. Then you get walked off, and then you're unable to avoid a sweep there. You just started to wonder, all right, well, have we seen the worst of this club, or is the worst still to come, and how are they going to find a way to turn it around? And then they kind of gave you some answers in Milwaukee. It was just a different-looking club, and you know, baseball is a weird game. It's a funny game. I talked to Michael Harris, about a week and a half ago, about what his struggles have been this season. And you might know that Michael this year obviously hasn't been able to get himself going as of yet. But he had a huge home run for the Braves in Game 1 of this series against the Rockies to tie things up and to swing that momentum back in the direction the Braves needed it to. And Atlanta proceeded to score 11 unanswered runs, take that first game, then a win behind Spencer Strider on Saturday, and then unable to come through on Sunday, obviously. We've chronicled that. But Michael Harris, I asked him, you know, when you're going through what you're going through and you've still got a lot of baseball left, but clearly the results haven't been what you want them to be, like what are the adjustments? Do you start to feel any kind of sense of urgency? And he told me, no, it's not so much urgency, but the weird thing about baseball is when I'm feeling my best, I just don't seem to get the results. And then when I'm not feeling so great, that seems to be when the results roll in. It's just kind of a weird game. And I guess you could describe this along another way. I've heard a lot of baseball people say it. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Maybe the Braves need a little bit of that. They certainly need a little bit of good fortune. Let's just put it that way. But when you look at what's been going on for Atlanta, I think it's a struggle to win those close games, those winnable games. That, I think, is the struggle that we've really circled and maybe outlined in red pen and then gone over with every color highlighter you can imagine, because this, to me, is the stat that really tells the story for the Braves season. They're 9-19 in one-run games, and in those one-run games, they have been outscored 115 to 105. That's how a one-run game works. But what I'm saying is, and I know this is not what if, I know we can't play this hypothetical out, but the difference in the Braves season hangs in the balance of about 10 runs. 10 more runs they've given up, 10 fewer runs than they've scored, however you want to look at it. But this is a club that when Alex Anthopoulos, among other people, points to the run differential and says, we're hanging around. We're in these games. We're not winning the close games. That is absolutely true. It doesn't make it any less frustrating, though, and it does nothing to change the record, because your record tells you what you are, at least in that moment in time. And unless or until the Braves are able to positively affect that run differential and thereby positively affect their record in one-run games, for example, they may find themselves in this very frustrating boat. Now, they were involved in a 9-run game on Sunday. They were on the wrong side of that. I don't know what the record is in 9-run games. I'm going to just guess 0-1. But they had to have that series in Milwaukee, and they did it. And I thought we saw some signs by the offense. And honestly, one-run games or whatever, you've just got to see this team put up more runs. You've got to get more out of the offense. So I looked into runs per game. If they score 5 or more, the Braves are 21-4 this year. Now, this is not shocking stuff. If you score a bunch of runs, typically you're going to win that game. But when the Braves score 3 runs or less, which has now happened 31 times in their 70 games this season, they're 2-29. That right there is beyond just the frustration of a one-run game. That is, your offense hasn't been able to do enough. And when you go through there and look at some of those games, you were talking about some very close, some very winnable games. Obviously, some one-runs are in there. But that, I feel like, is the difference between this club this year and in years past. It just seemed to be the Braves' DNA that they found a way to win close games. And a good team finds a way to do that. A team that's struggling or a team that's just not good at all, like the Colorado Rockies, probably not going to have a great record in those places. But the Braves, obviously, their expectations a bit higher than the Colorado Rockies. So a game like Sunday when Grant Holmes is absolutely dealing, that's the kind of game you want to win comfortably. But where's the offense? It continues to be the question for this club. And I heard Brian Snitker talking about it after the game. He said, look, you just keep waiting for it to happen because they've done it before, but nobody knows what the answer is. And I think that he's been asked 6 ways from Sunday what's going on with this offense. Nobody has the answer to it. The players don't have the answer to it. The coaches don't have the answer to it. No fans have the answer to it. Even if we crowdsource the answers on social media, it ain't going to change the results of what's going on. It's going to be individual performance that will add up to collective success as an offense. And how do they crack that code, and how do they get themselves back on track? Well, they're going to have to start getting some production. One place they are getting some serious production is the top of the order, because Ronald Acuna Jr. is burning brighter than ever in his comeback from his second torn ACL. And it was fair to wonder, just based on the history, what Ronald was going to look like coming off that previous knee injury in 2022 when he was an adequate but obviously lesser version of himself who was also trying to manage residual knee pain throughout the course of the season. It sapped his power because it was his drive leg. It was his right leg the last time, left leg this time. And he'd never been through that before. But I think that the knowledge, the experience, and the route that he took in his rehab and the timetable that the Braves set forth in bringing him back really helped set him up for success this time. And he got a ton of time at the plate down in Florida as he was getting himself ready to go out on the rehab assignment. And then you saw, once he started playing in games that count, you saw the old Ronald Acuna Jr. And we've seen a ton of it in 21 games since returning to the Braves. Ronald is batting .390 with 7 home runs. He has already surpassed last year's home run total in, about 25 or 30 less games. And he's on a 55 homer pace if we were to stretch this out over 162. Now, clearly, he's not going to get a chance to play 162 this year, but if he plays every day or just about every day for the rest of the year, Ronald Acuna Jr. is on a very comfortable 37 homer pace if he plays 110-ish games. And you don't need me to tell you, but I will anyway because it's my show, and I guess if I don't, nobody will. 37 homers in 110 games is some pretty good production, and that is why I feel like, and I've been asked about this in some of the call-ins I've done, and if we're looking for some bright spots and maybe some things to kind of put off to the side on a day that you lose 10-1 to the Rockies and there's really not much else to say other than you should have won, I think Ronald Acuna Jr. is making himself a pretty good case, especially with a fan vote and the game in Atlanta, to be the starting right fielder for the National League in the All-Star game. Now, that's not going to help the Braves win, but I do think that it is a testament to the player that Ronald Acuna Jr. is and to what he has done coming back. And if he continues to play like this, I do feel like ultimately some guys are going to start to join him. I know that saying is that hitting is contagious, but it felt like that the Braves, for lack of a better term, can't catch a cold offensively over the past couple of years. Or maybe they have caught a cold, and that's the problem. But either way, Ronald Acuna Jr. playing like this at the top of the order, hopefully that will be something that can eventually get that pilot light relit for this Braves offense, and they can start to turn up the heat. And I'm not going to be one of the countless people that just tells you, okay, well, when it gets warm outside, the Braves will warm up. That wasn't the case last year. I know they went through a lot of injuries and some other things that definitely sapped their performance, but you got to go a little deeper than that. And I think that the Braves' struggles have gone a little further than that, so you're just kind of wondering when things are going to start to click again for the Matt Olsons. Even Marcell Ozuna, we saw some good things from him this weekend. He had gone cold over the past week or 10 days. Had been dealing with the hip issue. Said that that's not something that's bothering him a great amount right now. And he hit a big 3-run homer on Friday that helped the Braves in a comeback victory over the Colorado Rockies. And you need to see that. You need to start seeing some of those 3-run homers. 2 of them happened on Friday. I mentioned Michael Harris had one, and then Marcell Ozuna had the other. But the Braves have only hit 6 3-run homers this entire season. And again, they played game number 70 today. 6 3-run homers. They had not hit a 3-run homer since April the 23rd when Eli White hit a go-ahead blast against the St. Louis Cardinals. And Sean Murphy has 2 of the 6 Braves 3-run homers this year. If you're keeping score of them, there aren't that many of them. But be that as it may, the Braves got to get more power. They've got to get more big hits with runners in scoring position. That has continued to be a struggle for this club. But they are getting the pitching right now. There's just no arguing about that. The kind of starts that you've been seeing routinely from Chris Sale, from Spencer Schwellenbach, from Grant Holmes and Spencer Strider over the weekend has to have you feeling pretty good. And I know Bryce Elder got pulled on Friday night, didn't have a good outing, but overall, if he's your 5th starter, he's been giving you at least the bare minimum and keeping you in the game time and time again, really a little bit more than that. If you date it back to his big start against the San Francisco Giants a week ago. You got the pieces there in rotation. You're still, I think, trying to piece it together in the bullpen, though. That is going to be a question mark, and there are some things to, I think, figure out both internally and perhaps externally as far as adding to that group. But your starting rotation is putting you in position to win games on a regular basis. And how about Spencer Strider on Saturday? I don't know if anybody needed to see that performance more, perhaps, than Spencer Strider, who had made 5 starts, and the Braves had lost all 5 of those games. And if I were to only give you one statistic that just sticks in the craw of Spencer Strider, yeah, that's a thing, sticks in the craw of Spencer Strider, it is going to the mound and his team losing on that day. I think that just burns them up. It burns up most players, but Spencer Strider just in particular has been very methodical about saying, look, my job is to go out there, give us a chance to win. I did not do my job. And I think that he was down about as low as I had heard him prior to this start against the Colorado Rockies, where he just went out and had a vintage Spencer Strider performance. A double-digit strikeout performance for the first time since September of 2023. One of the better strikeout performances of his career, and he's had quite a few of those, including the club record, single-game record, which Grant Holmes was challenging him for this afternoon. But 6 innings of shutout ball with 3 hits allowed, 1 walk, and 13 strikeouts for Spencer Strider on 87 pitches. And look, I know he probably wanted to go out there and have himself another inning, but he did everything that he needed to do, took a huge step forward, and hopefully that is the big springboard start for Spencer from a mechanic standpoint, from a velocity standpoint, where he picked up a full mile an hour on his average fastball velocity, and you saw it right out of the gate. 97, 97, 98, a strikeout to get his day started, first to 13 of those. You needed to see a performance like that from Spencer Strider, and I think more importantly, he needed to see a performance like that from Spencer Strider. So as you start to move forward and project what you need out of this Braves club. More of that from Spencer Strider would certainly be a box to check. More of what we've seen from Spencer Schwellenbach of late would be another box to check. Grant Holmes, check that one as well. And Chris Sale has also looked great. We're going to talk about some of the things going on with Chris Sale a little bit later as they're lining him up for a couple of big starts coming up in the next couple of weeks. But when we come back, though, we're going to keep the Father's Day discussion going. I'm going to be joined by my dad, Fred McAuley, for a discussion about baseball in our family. Hope you join me for that. This is From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Back to Grant McAuley for more From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday evening, and this Sunday is not like all the other Sundays of the year because today it is Father's Day, and today I am joined by my father, Fred McAuley, who is going to take a trip down memory lane with me for a chat about baseball, some of his memories and some of the memories, I guess, of me growing up, and quite a few of those that we've been able to share together. Well, it's a thrill to sit down on Father's Day and welcome you into the show. Thanks for making the time, as you always have over the years. It's great to finally be able to do a little bit of this radio thing with you, Dad.
Well, thank you, Grant. It's my pleasure to be here today.
So let's talk a little bit about baseball growing up. We'll get to me and all of the things that you've seen over the years, but I know you as a kid, and probably most kids in the 1950s, they got the national game on the radio and on television, and a lot of times that meant the New York Yankees, so it's not hard to figure out how your favorite player growing up was Mickey Mantle, and that's probably you and a whole generation of kids.
I believe it was. Not only was Mickey such a good-looking athlete, but he was a performer, and we got the full package with him. It was really easy for us all to fall in love with him.
Yeah, when you look back on those games, I mean, now you can pull the game up on your phone. You can listen to it wherever you go. You can watch it pretty much wherever you go if MLB can figure out its blackout thing, but putting that aside, what are your early memories of baseball, whether it was those national games, whether it was playing Little League, whether it was getting out in the yard playing catch with your dad?
Well, my dad took me to Grayson Stadium in Savannah, where we had a minor league team, and I got to see the early spring training professional team come through there, and they passed us out with a fully signed team picture, and Curt Flood was on there. And I was able to save that for so many years. I've shared it with you. So you're going to have to look that up and find out where it is and be sure it's in a treasured storage place.
Well, I'm going to have to go through my archives here because I am not sure where that is at the moment. And you know, and many people listening right now know that when you move, a lot of things are harder to find for a while. But I am, of course, going to look for that. So we talked a little bit about growing up and being able to have that first encounter with Major League Baseball. And there weren't as many teams back then. Of course, expansion didn't happen until 1961. So for the most part, you had, 8 teams in each league, and now we have 30. So by some very simple math, Major League Baseball has almost doubled in your lifetime. So as you look back, what stood out to you about the teams that you were able to watch as a kid, whether it was on TV, whether it was listening on the radio, whether it was those games you went to at Grayson Stadium, or collecting a few baseball cards here or there?
Well, collecting baseball cards was a pleasure because we always got the bubble gum with that. I think that's one of the things that allowed me to find out who some of the players were, because a lot of times on TV it was black and white. The camera angles were awkward, even pretty far away. It was difficult for a busy kid to keep track of who was doing what as detailed and concentrated as you do. But it was always a pleasure to find the game of the week and it be a familiar team, as you mentioned, like the Yankees were, so that I could stay right there and key in on when my next favorite player would come up.
Yeah, getting those reports were not at the push of a button back then. A lot of times you had to wait and see it in the paper, and then other times you just kind of had to see when the magazines or periodicals came out to just get to know who the players were around the league. So baseball cards, I feel like, were kind of that connective tissue where you got, yes, the gum, but you also got to know who's playing, where they play, and maybe where they were playing before that and follow their entire careers. Now, we talked a little bit about Mickey Mantle being your favorite player growing up. For me, it was Dale Murphy, who starred on those 80s Braves teams. And my earliest memories of baseball were those powder blue uniforms that everybody seemed to have back then. Eventually, you became a Braves fan as you grew up, and it probably helped that they moved the team from Milwaukee back in 1966. So by the time you made it to Atlanta, you had some ball games to go to, didn't you?
That's exactly right. I think having the Braves move to Atlanta, and also I moved to Atlanta in the mid-'60s also, that really gave us opportunity to see professional baseball. It was a lot of fun to be able to see so many teams come through there, and a lot of times we would have favorite players from more than one team. So even if the Braves had a bad day and didn't win, you were able to watch the performance of Cincinnati, which was really a hot team too for many of those years.
Yeah, it definitely was throughout the decade of the 1970s. There was also some good stuff going on, of course, for the Braves. We talk about that all the time here on the show, what Hank Aaron was doing. 1 year of Eddie Matthews. He did check the guest book in 1966, so he's the only Brave to play in all three cities for the team. And, of course, back then when the Braves moved to Atlanta, it was the brand-new Atlanta Stadium, which they shared with the Atlanta Falcons. So what do you remember about that ballpark? And I know they don't make them like that anymore, and there's probably more than a few good reasons for that.
Well, I think probably the biggest thing that happened in Atlanta Fulton County Stadium was Hank Aaron chasing the home run championship. The entire city followed that as closely as they possibly could. And the interesting thing is that even after the records were broken, every time we would go to a game and see him hit another home run, we were watching a whole new record for the first time.
That's a good way to put it, because he continued to make history. And, of course, he ended with 733 home runs, most in Braves history, and his 755, second all-time in Major League Baseball history. Now, when I look back at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, that was where I went to my first Major League Baseball game. It was, according to my records, in the summer of 1989. It was the Braves and the Reds, and we got to see Dale Murphy play in a Braves uniform then, because the next time we saw him, it was a series when he returned to Atlanta as a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. But I know we had a great time, and I got to share those memories with you and my grandfather on my mom's side as well. So that's something that, unfortunately, we didn't get to do nearly enough, though there were quite a few miles between us and the Braves when I was growing up.
Those were really, really wonderful memories. It was fun to share with your grandfather, too. I think in our case, we pretty much were a baseball family. We had Mom involved, we had you involved, we had myself, and it was a family connection.
No, it definitely was, and folks may know by now that I did not grow up in Atlanta, but I am, of course, a Georgia resident my whole life, and it was Savannah through my high school years, which meant watching games on TBS and listening on the radio to Skip and Pete and Don and Joe and Ernie. Those were the voices that shaped my love for baseball, and I figured out back then as a kid that I wasn't going to be able to play baseball as a career, as a professional, but I did learn a really valuable thing by listening to all those games, and that is that you can talk about the game for a heck of a lot longer than you can play it.
That's true. I pretty much think that anytime we had an opportunity to catch a game, we had the TV on, and the entire family was gathered around and watching intensely to see how the turnout would be. And we did have some great seasons with the Braves, and of course we had great players too.
Yeah, it made it a lot of fun. And the Braves, there wasn't much to write home about in the 1980s, but everything changed around 1991, and our expectations have been sky high, I feel like, just about every summer since then over the last 35 years. So let me ask you a question that I have probably not asked you before, but when did you recognize that this was something, this baseball broadcasting thing, that I wanted to do? And what's it been like to kind of watch along? Because I know you and Mom have been with me every step of the way.
Well, we pretty much learned that you were keeping records, making your own fantasy teams with your baseball cards, building a page full of statistics with any number of combinations of players that you liked, and then stacking out their performance mathematically. And I've never seen a kid your age at that time so intense as to do that much mathematics in a given day.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of fun, and a lot of baseball, of course, is the numbers, but the game goes pretty far beyond that. And I know a big part of my journey was taking all of those collective moments, maybe every single line of those stats that I was adding up over the years, and every newspaper article that was saved by my other grandfather, who always made sure that I had plenty of material to work with, and taking that combined knowledge and then getting into the world of broadcasting. And a big part of that journey was calling baseball games in the minor leagues as a play-by-play man. And I don't think that you and Mom missed too many of those game broadcasts, and I appreciate you taking all that time to listen. I love getting a chance to host you guys at the ballparks at various points in the season as well, so that you could really see what it was like to live the dream in the minor leagues.
We had a wonderful time visiting you in South Florida when you were with the Stone Crabs. We had the game, and we had the local seafoods, and we had the opportunity to bring along grandchildren as the new grandchildren came along. And altogether, we had a wonderful time when we would visit down in South Florida.
Yeah, a whole nother generation was able to be opened up to baseball at that point as well with my sister's kids, and I believe 2 out of the 3 got to make the visit to the minor league ballpark before I made it back to Atlanta, and of course have been here since 2013. Now let's talk about one of my favorite baseball memories, actually a couple of trips that we took. We've been to Cooperstown twice, once in 2005 when we had it all to ourselves, and another trip in 2018 on induction weekend when Chipper Jones went into the hall, and Dad, there were a few more people there for that one, weren't there?
There certainly were. That was the most exciting Cooperstown induction, I think, probably in the record at that time. They had the largest alumni count that had ever attended an induction for a new crew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the great events at the Hall of Fame induction weekend is a parade of all those living Hall of Famers. You mentioned the most that had ever attended an induction weekend. We got to see them all brought in on their individual trucks, and they all went into the Hall of Fame, where I'm sure they had a very nice dinner. But many of them spent the time to walk the streets of Cooperstown that were lined with fans and sign autographs for hours.
I think it was really a big deal to see the big-name players out there for more than an hour in the heat, visiting with fans. Our most exciting moment was Cal Ripken standing 2 or 3 feet in front of us for about 20 minutes signing autographs, continuing on up and down the street for more than an hour, entertaining the fans while the parade was wrapped up and people were assembling into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, pretty incredible to see that. And whether it was the guys that we had watched that were in a Braves uniform, like Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Bobby Cox, of course, Chipper Jones was going into the Hall of Fame as well. But there were a host of other stars, including Cal Ripken and also Ken Griffey Jr., who spent a lot of time signing some autographs. So some really cool things to see as far as that trip was concerned. And again, a lot more folks there in a midsummer visit for induction weekend than there were in September when we went back in 2005. But I enjoyed both of those trips because 2005 was obviously the first time I'd ever gotten to see the Hall of Fame itself. And we also made a stopover in Yankee Stadium, and we got to see a game there. And I felt like that was a pretty cool connective moment because, as we talked about way back when we started this little chat, Mickey Mantle was your favorite player, and we finally got to see the place where he played his baseball.
Yes, Grant, it was a very exciting day to be at Yankee Stadium and to see the game, just sitting in the seats and just glancing around at the places that you've only seen on TV. Seeing it in person is just amazing. When you would watch the exchange of players at the turn of the inning, and you'd see Randy Johnson walking out to the field, it looked like the kindergarten kids were coming out behind him. He was a really statuesque presence in the game. That was a really good day for baseball, Grant, and I'm glad we got to share that.
Absolutely. One of the great memories and one of the great trips that we have taken, and we have taken quite a few of those. And this was a fun little trip down memory lane, and obviously something that we haven't gotten to do a whole lot of, and that's share a broadcast together. So, Dad, happy Father's Day. Thanks for making the time, and I look forward to talking to you and to Mom very soon.
Very good, Grant. Thanks so much for including me on Father's Day.
That was my father, Fred McAuley, and to all the fathers out there, a very happy Father's Day to you. Hope that you've been able to enjoy some games together over the years, and hope you've been able to share those memories for even longer than that. When we come back, we will turn the page to what else is happening across Major League Baseball. We'll take our trip around the big leagues next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Here we go now.
Baseball, talking Braves and beyond.
Baseball
With From the Diamond, Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we embark on hour number 2, our trip around the big leagues, where we will discuss a few stories that caught my attention this week, and perhaps they will catch yours before all is said and done. But one of the things that I think that we could all do without ever having to talk about again is what's going on with the Major League Baseball. And unfortunately, for what feels like the at least 6th or 7th straight year, we're having to ask that question again. And more importantly, Major League Baseball is once again having to acknowledge that its balls are not, from year to year, performing the exact same way. And no, that is not a euphemism. Major League Baseball has had some quality control issues, I think, with how these are manufactured, and that is ultimately going to affect the game. Now, they've done a lot of different things to, I think, try to bring some uniformity to it, but they have yet to be able to really crack this code. And once again, we have reports, this one from The Athletic this week, that Major League Baseballs are not flying as far this year as they have in years past. And in fact, I believe, if I read this correctly, it's the lowest mark or second lowest mark over the past 10 seasons in terms of the average distance that the ball is flying, perhaps even in the StatCast era. It just really depends on what chart you're looking at. And obviously, I know it's not the most exciting thing to look at, but if you're a fan and you are watching the game and you are seeing the ball fly and wondering, why did that run out of steam on the warning track? This could, in fact, be the answer. Now, scoring thus far, and every team's about 70 games into the season at this point, so we're closing in on the halfway mark. The All-Star break is right around the corner, and that's usually a little bit over the mathematical halfway point of 81 games. But teams are averaging 4.32 runs this year compared to 4.39 in 2024. Now, home runs are also down just a touch, which could explain why scoring's down a touch, from 1.09 home runs this year to 1.12 in 2024. And that doesn't sound like a lot, given. But let's flash back to 2019. You might remember that as a year in which the ball was flying at a rate that I don't know that we had seen it at any point in the game's history league-wide, because it was averaging nearly 1.4 home runs per game, every single team in Major League Baseball combined. So the aggregate there was a record number of home runs. And now 3 years later, that number is down what looks to be about 20 to 25%. And that obviously is curious and brings up questions about the baseball. Early in 2022, it had gotten so bad that The Athletic at that time, Eno Saris, who was on the show a few weeks ago, and Ken Rosenthal investigated in depth and did a whole bunch of research, which now it seems like we're having to do again, because ultimately, as you continue to monitor this, the home run rate is the lowest it's been in 10 seasons. And that's not a result of the pitch clock, and that's not a result of pitchers throwing harder. It seems to be a result of the baseball and the way it's manufactured. And as far as the flight of the ball, what affects it negatively? Well, the height of the seams. Those seams are hand-stitched, every single baseball. It's not a machine that does this. If you really want to, I think, find something that would be fun to watch if you've never seen it before, and even if you have, I think this is pretty cool, go look up the way that these baseballs are manufactured. You can find a video on YouTube. It will show you exactly what it looks like to see a Major League Baseball put together, and I had no idea that that was the process until a few years ago. But every single baseball is hand-stitched, so there are going to be, I would guess, some variations in it. But variations this wild. Major League Baseball needs to get a handle on it. And if you're wondering if this has reached dugouts league-wide, well, yes, it has. Pittsburgh Pirates outfielder Andrew McCutchen posted this week on X that an MLB representative told him the baseballs being used this season are different and they have higher seams, which leads to more drag on the baseball. McCutchen said, and this, I quote, "I was told by a rep for MLB the balls are indeed different this year. They stated higher seams produce more drag on the baseball, causing it not to travel as far as they should." That's a great thing for a hitter to have to think about. When McCutchen asked why, he was told every baseball is hand-sewn, so no ball is the same, which, again, we just talked about. But when I asked if there's something that can be done about correcting the current performance of this year's baseball, he was told there was nothing that can be done about it this season, but MLB is working hard on getting to the bottom of why the seams are higher. So there you have it. Major League Baseball, once again, having some issues with the quality control of its baseball, and as a result of that, has an issue with the quality of the product if it causes the scoring to be affected in any way, shape, or form. A slight variation from year to year, that's to be expected. But when things start to drop, like home runs and runs scored over a larger sample on a much higher percentage, that I think is when you've reached the point where something needs to be done about it, and obviously MLB needs to do that. Now, what has MLB been busy fixing, you might be wondering? Well, how about what's available on the MLB.com archive? Major League Baseball removed the A's reverse boycott game broadcast from the digital archive this week. It's been 2 years since the Oakland A's fans joined forces to make one of the loudest statements possible with this reverse boycott. This is from the San Francisco Gate. They showed out in force to boycott against A's owner John Fisher and his plan to move the team to Las Vegas, which obviously is still en route right now. They had to stop over in Sacramento before they get there. Now it's a 2-year anniversary of that demonstration. The same A's fans were noticing that the game broadcasts have been removed from MLB's archive. So this was June 13th of 2023. So we're celebrating the 2-year anniversary of that. But every other game for the entire month of June 2023 has broadcasts available except for this one. MLB was asked about this, what happened to the broadcast for the game, and they said they're looking into it but did not provide an answer to any follow-up questions. So if you're looking into it and it's the only one missing, and the only one missing from the archive is the one where fans showed up en masse or didn't show up to boycott a game due to the ownership, I think that we can fill in the blanks here and say that this was probably not a mistake. Apparently, this was noticed by Last Dive Bar, which is a fan group that organized the protests against Fisher, and the co-founder, Brian Johansson, said that they noticed the videos were removed on Friday as they were preparing to clip some highlights for social media. So they were going to celebrate the anniversary of that not-so-fun game, and I guess MLB decided that they would rather you not be celebrating that particular day in baseball history. And, you know, I still have some questions about whether or not the A's really do end up in Vegas. I don't know that it's a fait accompli. I'm just still curious as to whether or not everything really goes through. They get over the finish line. I guess they're continuing to take steps, and I don't want to waste too much of the show on it, but it just seemed like a situation that could have been handled so many different ways and better ways to keep baseball in Oakland, and ultimately the ownership wins out, as one does. Roman Anthony debuted this week, top prospect in Major League Baseball, called up by the Boston Red Sox. He's played a handful of games now, and you might know, and you might have just heard, as I was talking to my dad on Father's Day about some baseball cards and collecting that I've done over the course of my life that I still do. A number of collectors rushed out to eBay on Monday night. The sports card market saw a tremendous movement following the call-up. An eBay research tool confirmed that more than 1,450 sales happened across Monday and early Tuesday, and that's quite a bit. And at the time of the retrieval on Tuesday morning of that data, 25 of those sales had topped $1,000 or more. So folks are dumping some money into Roman Anthony, including $4,000 for a 2023 Bowman Chrome Prospect autograph. That's out of 50. If you're into the hobby, then you know these can fetch a pretty penny, especially once they've been graded. This was a PSA 9. The record sale for an Anthony card at public auction, though, was $62,500, which sold in September of last year for a one-of-one Superfractor autograph. And, you know, if a lot of this sounds like a complete foreign language, the modern hobby is, I think, intriguing for a lot of people. It's kind of like playing the stock market in a lot of ways. But you might know and have heard the more notable story about a rookie being called up and really injecting some life into the hobby was Paul Skeens a year ago. They have what they call the rookie debut patch, which is a patch that is sewn on to their uniform for their first game. It is then taken from that uniform, cut, and put in a card, and obviously that's a one-of-one collectible. The Paul Skeens was pulled and sold for $1.1 million at auction in March. I don't know what Roman Anthony's is going to go for, but I don't think that it's going to be $1.1 million, though we'll find out with how he plays over the next few months. Maybe that will change the outlook for that card, but it won't be available, won't be in Topps product until 2026. But I thought that was an interesting little peek into the collectibles world. Those are a few stories from around the big leagues. When we come back, we will continue that conversation, continue our trip, and talk with Mike Ferrin of MLB Network Radio. We'll ask him a little bit about what's going on with the baseball in 2025 and several other things. Coming up next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Baseball, talking Braves and beyond.
Baseball
with From the Diamond, Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we continue our trip around the big leagues from the Kia Studios on a Sunday. I want to welcome in my buddy Mike Ferrin. You can hear him Monday through Friday on Sirius XM's MLB Network Radio. He hosts a show called Power Alley, and he joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline. Mike, appreciate you making time. I know you are a busy man, and you, like me, love all the things that go into baseball season, and you're getting to do some pretty fun stuff right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in Omaha for the Men's College World Series, which is always a blast. This is the 7th one that I've covered, and Omaha doesn't have any business being this walkable a city. It's actually amazing. Like, you stay downtown, you can walk to these great restaurants, and coffee shops, and walk to the ballpark, and man, it is really good. And they roll out the red carpet for this event. So if you're interested in college baseball, I know it's been a while since Georgia and Georgia Tech have been there, but Georgia, man, it is a great great event, and it is so much fun whether your team's in it or not, and I highly recommend making a trip.
Well, it is definitely on my list, that is for sure. Now, as we talk about the Major League Baseball season for 2025, it is not unlike many of the years before it. And why do I say that? Well, I had Eno Saris of The Athletic on a few weeks ago to chat about some pitcher metrics and umpire grading, and wouldn't you know it, eventually we ended up wondering aloud if the first month or so worth of batted ball data was telling us anything about MLB's quality control for the baseball itself. It's in question. Mike, I know you're shocked by this, so we learned, based on reports from The Athletic this week, that it is indeed being discussed, that quality control issue. So what do you make of this, and why do you think we end up having to talk about this thing on an almost annual basis?
Oh, God, it is exhausting, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, this is like 7 years of this now, where we're like preordained to see what happens the first week of the season and be like, what's up with the ball? Like, that's our first reaction, right?
Yeah.
And it's just unbelievably infuriating because it's really the last thing that we want to be able to talk about. Like, it's not something that should be of interest. So the story was that the ball on average is traveling, 4 feet less than it did a year ago. And I didn't get a full sense of like how much of that was atmospheric and how much of it was the ball itself. It seemed to be the ball because there was more drag on it, right? That it was going against the aerodynamics were not quite as good. And, in the league's defense on this, they are all hand sewn, and they're done in a facility in Costa Rica, but then the storage and everything is the same, and everything's in a humidor now and all of this, right? So, like, they're trying to do these things around. But I think the thing that's most frustrating, and, like, this is frustrating as a fan, I would think it is probably frustrating to league officials too. And I haven't really talked to them about it, but I would guess that it's frustrating is that they can't get a handle on why this keeps happening. And I don't know what's happening internally. I don't think that there has been a huge level of transparency in terms of what they're doing other than the studies that they had and putting the humidor in each ballpark, right? On how the ball is actually constructed in Costa Rica. But it is a little bit frustrating to continue to watch this unfold where the way a ball is hit varies year to year because of the way the baseball is made. And listen, it's not like we haven't had rabbit ball years in the past. Like 87 was pretty famous for that. But holy cow, is this a frustrating conversation that we've been having seemingly every dang year.
What a strange thing that they just can't seem to get a handle on when it comes to just how the ball is manufactured in the modern era, which, again, perhaps they will figure it out. Maybe it's more than just how they're sewn. Maybe it's the storage. Maybe it's the quality of the materials. I don't know, but we probably won't solve it here today. I was just curious kind of what you thought about that because we are starting to get to that point of the season where you have enough data to start to draw some conclusions. And let's hit the field itself for what I will call, in this section, some more enjoyable on-field conversations. The first half has given us some really good stories. One of those is Cal Raleigh. He's the Mariners catcher leading the majors in home runs heading into the action this weekend alongside Aaron Judge. So, Mike, is that the tandem that you expected to be topping Major League Baseball in home runs?
I certainly expected Aaron Judge to be at the top. And I expected Cal Raleigh to be a player that would hit a lot of home runs this year, but I don't know that I had him on pace for 60 at this point. Listen, he is a tremendous power hitter. I think he's still growing as a hitter itself, but he is also one of, if not the most valuable defender behind the plate, too.
Yeah.
And certainly I think with the combination of offense and defense, pretty good case to be made that he's the best all-around catcher in baseball. He is really the offensive piece that is carrying the Seattle Mariners. They have not had the consistency of performance from Julio Rodriguez that I think they would have loved based on the extension they gave him during his rookie year. I don't know that Raleigh's going to end up hitting 60, but if he hits 45, that's a lot for a catcher, right?
Yeah.
Like that would be, I think what is it, 48 is the record for a guy who was a primary catcher with Sal Perez, and 41 of those, I think, were hit while he was behind the plate, which tied Todd Hundley's record. I just think that there's a chance that we're looking at an historic season from him as a catcher.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It is very rare air. You talk about the Todd Hundleys, Johnny Bench, and a handful of others that have ever been able to get to that 40-homer plateau as a catcher. And Cal Raleigh certainly doing some special things. And like you said, the Mariners needing every bit of that. Now, I want to talk about the best team in baseball. at least when we're looking at records heading into the weekend. That's the Detroit Tigers. They were a major surprise team in the second half last season, Mike, but they weren't going to sneak up on anybody in 2025. All they've done, though, I think, is play better this season. So I'm curious, where are you at on the Tigers and how they stack up with the other contenders in the American League?
Yeah, it's been a great story. I mean, remember they were a 501 shot at one point last year to make the postseason, and that was in August, right, before they went on that incredible run to finish the season and won the wild card round. The thing that's most surprising is how good their offense has been. Now, some of that is because of this resurgence of Spencer Torkelson, the former number 1 overall pick, who was in the minor leagues for a good chunk of last year and now finds himself as a potential all-star. So he and Riley Green give them the 1-2 punch that I think that they had hoped for. Against right-handed pitching, they have Kerry Carpenter, whose nickname in Detroit is Kerry Bonds, because he hits right-handed pitching like he's Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the better nicknames, right? And they've gotten better offensive contributions than they could have expected from a guy like Javier Baez. So, they have these pieces that have been really good. I'm still a little bit skeptical that their offense is quite what it's been so far. I think that they need to add just a little bit more in terms of, whether it's adding somebody who can play third base, which is not going to be easy on this trade market, or you're being able to add somebody else that helps to lengthen that lineup. I'd really like to see them do that because I think their pitching certainly is good enough to compete at the top of the league, but they really are one of the great stories. I expect that at this point that they're going to be in the postseason this year. I would think that they probably have a very, very good chance of winning the American League Central. I don't know if they'll finish with the top record or not, but I don't know that that really matters in the end. The goal is to get to the playoffs, and I think they're well-positioned to go in back-to-back years.
No doubt about it. Now, over in the National League, the Braves and everyone else are staring up at the New York Mets, who have the best record in the league and a huge lead in the NL East standings. We heard all about the Juan Soto deal over the winter for obvious reasons, but it's actually been things like bringing back Pete Alonso, another big year from Francisco Lindor, and a host of others in the supporting cast that I think have put the Mets in this position to me. I guess the question is, they've got some pitching issues. Is this sustainable? They have a huge lead in the division. Obviously, they made the postseason a year ago, but are we seeing the New York Mets kind of returning to that annual contendership that they very much have spent some big money to do?
Well, let's not undersell the impact of Juan Soto, though. I mean, since the beginning of May, he's got an OPS of like 950. So, I mean, he's been pretty Juan Soto-ish, despite what they've written about in New York, where apparently they can't have nice things. But, he's been incredible, over the last 6 weeks. He's been exactly what you would expect. Listen, their lineup we felt like was going to be pretty good coming into the season. They start with Francisco Lindor, and then they go to Juan Soto. And you're right, bringing back Pete Alonso, who's having a really good year, has been excellent. He slowed a little bit in May. He's picked it back up in June. But I think that their pitching, the way that they've gone about addressing their pitching is as interesting as anything because they have eschewed the, big money guys, instead looking for players that they can find on shorter-term deals who are effective. And I think they actually deserve a lot of credit for what they've done in terms of building this pitching staff. I think at this point you have to look at it as based on last year too. Hey, they threw the ball really, really well. They were a team that made it to the league championship series. I don't think that we can count out the fact that they seem to have some sort of secret sauce pitching wise. So I'm really bullish on them. And I think that they are one of the better teams in the National League and they are playing on it. They are deep enough and that they're going to go out and add if they have a chance to make that team stronger because they want to get, they haven't been to a World Series in a decade and they've got a chance to end that drought this year.
Yeah, certainly have the pockets to do that as well. Chatting with Mike Ferrin of MLB Network Radio here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. He joins me on the WadeFord.com hotline. A couple of quick questions for you about two teams facing off here in Atlanta this weekend. On the other end of the spectrum, from teams like the Tigers and the Mets, we find the Rockies. That's a club that I think has been run into the ground in recent years, and that may be putting it kindly. In 2018, it felt like they were kind of on the brink of putting together a team and maybe going on a run of at least competitive baseball, but that has cratered, and they're staring at a third straight 100-loss season that feels like a fait accompli at this point. It's not easy to do that either in Major League Baseball. I just want to point that out. So how did it get so bad, Mike? It wasn't just one thing. What is going on in Colorado, and is there any hope at the end of this road for them?
Well, I want to point out that it's a chance to be 3 straight 100-loss seasons where things got progressively worse.
Yeah.
That's even tougher to do. I mean, it's been brutal. And I agree with you. I thought like 16, 17, 18, listen, you had Nolan Arenado and Charlie Blackmon in their prime offensively, and they were good. Remember, they tied for the division championship in 2018 and lost a playoff game with the Dodgers and then beat the Cubs in a wild card game, right? Like, that was the team, and they ran down both the Dodgers and Arizona to do that. Arizona had led the division at the beginning of September that year. So it looked like they were on the right path. I just think that there are a couple things that plague them. One, they are far behind the times in terms of the advancements in making scouting and decisions and giving information to players to make them better. I think they have an owner that is unbelievably loyal to the players that they have there, which is both a really laudable quality and one that can prevent you from getting better when you continue to extend middling players as opposed to letting them seek free agency while you try to develop stars. And I think that impacts them at the deadline too, where they haven't been able to move as many guys out to try and, make the rebuild work a little bit faster because of the players that you acquire. It's just not a good team, and there's not enough depth in the organization for them to really feel like they're on the precipice of turning things around. And beyond that, they have a bunch of guys that probably aren't all that valuable that they really need to trade to try and jumpstart this, but there's just not going to be a whole lot of ceiling to the return. They don't have the star player that can, they don't have Juan Soto that they can trade for 3 or 4 prospects to get things closer to contention like what they've tried to do in Washington. Yeah. So it's a bad spot to be in. And it's too bad because it's not like the owner hasn't spent, like they've spent at a decent level. And it's not like they don't draw. Like, even with the team being bad, they're packing in 40,000 on the weekends because it's a great place to see a ball game. And Denver fans are great baseball fans. Mm-hmm. So it's an incredibly frustrating thing to watch because, like, the blueprint for them to get out of it is there. There's plenty of people that have followed it. They just don't seem to be able to read it.
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing. It's as you just laid out, there are multi-prongs on this rebuild or the idea of just building an organization the right way. And if you don't have a bunch of stars in the big league level and you're not developing any down on the farm, it is a long and difficult road because you're probably, no matter how deep your pockets are, not going to be able to spend your way out of that hole. Let me ask you about the Braves before we get out of here. They've been a disappointment to this point this season by outside expectations, by their own expectations. The offense is inconsistent at best. Pitching has some issues, which I've talked a lot about on the show, but has kept them in games for the most part. So what do you see from the outside, and do you expect the Braves to just figure it out at some point because they have a track record of doing just that?
Well, you keep hoping that they will. I felt like last year the offensive struggles were largely because they didn't have Ronald Acuna Jr., right? That was a big part of what happened offensively. And now that they've got Acuna back, I kind of was expecting him to take off right away. Now, winning the series in Milwaukee, especially with as poorly as they had been playing, what had been 7 straight series losses, was a step in the right direction. And, now they get Colorado. I do expect them to still be in the mix. I mean, listen, here's the thing. 40% of the league makes the playoffs now, right?
Yeah.
So as much as the division feels like it's out of reach, and they're probably not going to erase, a 14-game deficit or whatever it is from the Mets, it's not the only path for them to get to the postseason. They're competing as much against the Padres, or maybe more against the Padres and the Phillies, than they are against the Mets. And if you get in, you've got a chance. I mean, that's the difference in baseball's playoffs compared to sports like the NBA, where 80% of the favorites win. It's just a lot easier because the nature of baseball to win as the underdog. And all you have to do is look at Arizona in 2023 and see them with an 84-win team that made the playoffs. Heck, even the 2021 Braves team that won the World Series wasn't all that great a team, right? And they were under 500 at the trade deadline. So I understand that Braves fans got spoiled by the performances in 22 and 23 in particular. But I just think you have to remember it is a very long season, and there are multiple paths to get to the playoffs. And a large number of them, at least 3 of the spots of the 4 that they would have available to them, being the division and the 3 wild card, are still in play for them. They just need to play better.
Yeah, especially in close games. The Braves have played more one-run games than any team in baseball, and unfortunately they have lost more one-run games than anybody in baseball. That, however, could change. Some consistent offense would go a long way towards getting them on that track. Mike, as always, great to catch up with you. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Anytime, Grant. Take care.
He's Mike Ferrin of MLB Network Radio. Make sure you're following him on social. Make sure you're tuned in to Power Alley Monday through Friday as well. When we come back, we will turn our attention back to the Atlanta Braves, who have a pivotal stretch of games ahead against National League East opponents. Can the Braves finally start digging out of the hole they put themselves in? We'll discuss next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
I love baseball. Now back to more Grant McAuley and From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome in one last time to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. As we wrap up what has been 2 hours of discussion, or what will be by the time all said and done, 2 hours of discussion of what's been going on with the Atlanta Braves, some other things around Major League Baseball, and of course, a little Father's Day celebration thrown in there for you as well. Let's get back into what's been going on for Atlanta, and maybe more importantly, what needs to go on for Atlanta, because I think a large part of the discussion has begun to turn to that. Because as much as we can break down what is not going right in close games and what is not going right for the Braves offense particularly, which is leading to so many close games, I think you kind of have to look at where the Braves find themselves right now at this part of their schedule as they approach the mathematical halfway point of the season. The Braves played game number 70 on Sunday. It was a very nondescript 10-1 loss to the Colorado Rockies. Probably, I'd have to look. I'm not really that much of a glutton for punishment, but look through the Rockies game logs to see if they've had a bigger win this year. It really, you can basically count them on both hands how many wins they've had, just over that. And they have won a few more here in the month of June, but overall, this is not a club you expect to be on the wrong side of a lopsided score against. But the Braves are 8 games under 500 as they reach game number 70, more to my point, at 31-39. 11 games from now, they will reach that 81-game mark. But let's go ahead and put a 13-game slate ahead for the Braves on the table here and kind of dissect what it means for this club. Because the Braves, as it stands right now, and you look at the divisional standings, they're 13 games back of the New York Mets. And that feels like, and might be, an insurmountable lead. There is, yes, 92 games left to play. But you're going to have to, as I talked about this last week, if you just want to get to that 88-win mark of the 2021 club or the 89-win mark of the 2024 club, you've got to play 620 or so baseball the rest of the way, which means basically you got to win 2 out of the next 3 games. You got to win nothing but series for the next 92 games. You've watched the Atlanta Braves play. There's some inconsistency in their ability to score runs. So to this point, the Braves are playing .443 baseball. To turn it into 620 or better baseball, to push the high 80s, maybe 90 wins, and that certainly feels like a long shot at this point because the Braves would have to win 59 of their next 92 games to get there. The math, day by day by day, begins to work against them, not just in the standings, but also as you look in the wild card, because in the wild card, and I know we just had Mike Ferrin of MLB Network Radio on, and he did talk about it, and I had to ask him about what do you see from the Braves from the outside, because I think sometimes we get caught in our echo chamber, get a little bit upset about certain losses, and obviously you look at the state of the team, and it's not where anybody wants it to be. But yes, 40% of the league does make the postseason, but by doing some very simple math, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams ahead of the Braves in the wild card standings. That's not to speak of the Mets, the Cubs, and the Dodgers, who are all, division leaders. So you've got 10 teams in a better position than the Braves, at the very least at this point. So you got to climb over a lot of clubs if you want to get into the postseason. But this next 13 games, this is my point. I do have one, I promise. You're going to face the Mets 7 times. You have not seen the Mets yet, but they're the club with a 13-game lead in the division. So if you did want to whittle that down, yes, you need to beat them head-to-head. Secondarily, though, if you just want to start marching toward 500, where you start to feel a little bit more confident about your chances for the postseason in general and at large, you're going to have to do it by beating this team head-to-head. You're going to have to do it by beating the Marlins, a club that you should be able to beat, but a club that just picked up a 3-game sweep over the weekend. And you've also got to go head-to-head with the Philadelphia Phillies, who have been pretty troublesome thus far this year. And obviously, the Phillies have been a bit of a villain for the Braves in recent years. So this is going to be a tough stretch of baseball. And what's the expectation going to be? After 7 games with the Mets, 3 with Miami, 3 more with the Phillies, as you try to make a climb to 500, you're 8 games under right now. So the Braves ultimately, in these 13 games, would need to go, 11-2 to climb over 500? That seems like it's asking a lot. Could it be done? Yeah. Is it likely? I don't know about that. But the Braves have got to play out the schedule. They got to play the teams in front of them, and that's what they're going to do. And that's what they've been doing all year because they've been trying to figure this thing out offensively. They're getting enough pitching to be in these games. I would think, by and large, if I look at this next 13 games, the Braves are probably going to be in position from a pitching standpoint to win 9 or 10 of those games. That has kind of been who they are. If you go back and look through that schedule, the Braves are not getting blown off the field. Yeah, they lost 10-1 to the Rockies today. I realize the irony of making this statement on a day in which the Braves played one of their worst games of the year from a final score standpoint, even though they got one of their best pitching performances of the entire year. So go figure. But the Braves are not getting routinely run off the field by these teams, and I think that's what makes it more frustrating. And I talked about this earlier. You look at their record in one-run losses at 9-19. And so that means they've been outscored by 1 run 10 more times than they've been able to win those games, if that makes sense. I don't know if I could have picked a more confusing way to say that, but follow me. 115 to 105 is the total run count that the Braves have been outscored by in their 29 one-run games. So it really is that simple. You were talking about essentially a 10-run swing the other way that would make the Braves' season much different. But this is not a what-if scenario. It is what it is, and they are 9-19 in one-run games, and it's one of the reasons that they find themselves where they are. They've already climbed back to 500 from being 8 games under at one point. To do it again, though, and to do it as quickly as they did it the last time, who knows? They're going to have to go out there and prove it ultimately. So where do they have to be after this 13 games with the Mets and with the Phillies and with the Marlins? I think they got to be within 3 games of 500 to feel like this stretch went well enough. And once you get into July and approach the All-Star break, I think you want to be finding your way to 500. Now, if they are able to stay within about 3 games of 500 or thereabouts, I'm just using that as my general goal here for the club, and I'm sure they're going to write it down. But if they're able to do that and climb by having some good series against the Mets and the Marlins and the Phillies, then all of a sudden you look at the wild card race and it doesn't seem so daunting. Because even if you've got 4, 5, 6 teams in front of you, at least you're within 3.5 or 4 games, which is possible if you're able to play well enough and finally push yourself back to 500. Every team ahead of the Braves in the wild card race is at least 2 games over 500, so I will throw that out there. You're going to have to continue winning. But at least you're able to get it to a manageable place. And if you do that, then obviously I think the Braves and Alex Anthopoulos to that point are going to go out there and shop and try to figure out ways to make the Braves better. They're ultimately going to have to hit in some way, shape, form, or fashion better than they have in order to put themselves in position to really make the most of whatever buying they're going to do, because I think you look for some bullpen pieces. I think you can look for possible upgrades, maybe in the outfield, maybe at shortstop. I mean, then you've got the whole Jurickson Profar thing. We learned this week, and obviously we were expecting this, that Jurickson Profar is going to have the opportunity to play some minor league games and can return from his 80-game suspension on July the 2nd. And that's if there are no more rainouts. It's an 80-game suspension. And July 2nd is the day that he is eligible to return. But as we know, even if you get Profar back, and even if he is a productive member of the team, which needs to be more of a certainty than an if, you can't use him in the postseason. So it helps you to a certain point, and then you're going to have a pretty good plan B in that regard. So do the Braves go out there looking for some kind of plan B? And that could also be useful because if Profar comes back and doesn't play particularly well, even if he's signed to a decent contract, which he is, I don't think if you're trying to fight and make the playoffs, you're under any obligation to just play this guy just to play him. He is not one of your core pieces. This is not, trying to work Michael Harris or Ozzie Albies through a long slump or Sean Murphy through some difficulties at the plate. It's certainly not trying to figure out some highs and lows from an Austin Riley or a Matt Olson or even a Ronald Acuna Jr. a couple of years ago. So I think you could see them go out there and look for that. But ultimately, their starting rotation could look pretty good. And with that line of thinking, the Braves decided not to throw Chris Sale over the weekend because they want to line him up to be able to make series starts against the Mets in both series and against the Phillies at the end of the month. So It looks like Chris Sale is going to throw on Wednesday, which is Game 2 against the New York Mets. Let's take a look ahead on that schedule. Braves are off on Monday. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they will play against the New York Mets in this 3-game series that will be at Truist Park. Then there's a 4-game series at Citi Field after the Braves stop over in Miami. So you're not looking to have Chris Sale making starts against the Rockies and Marlins. You're looking to have him maximize his innings by facing the Mets twice and then going after the Phillies at the end of the month. Now, Grant Holmes went on Sunday, and he got himself back on track after what was a rough start for him. And, of course, you know, he had that bad one against the Arizona Diamondbacks in which he couldn't get things going. The Braves ultimately lost that game in a not-so-fun fashion. But Grant has pitched since then, and I think he's looked pretty good overall this season and looked outstanding on Sunday. I heard some of his comments after the game just saying he had made some mechanical adjustments, and he was getting more swings and misses with the fastball. I think that was true. He also had a really good slider working, and when you pile up 15 strikeouts in 6 1/3 innings, my friends, you were doing something extremely right on the mound, and Grant Holmes has done that. Braves pitchers who have struck out 15 or more batters in a start. How about this list? Spencer Strider, John Smoltz twice, and Warren Spahn. So 2 Hall of Famers, and Spencer Strider, a major league strikeout leader, and Grant Holmes, who, again, just continues to be. And how about celebrating 1 year in the big leagues? He made his debut on Father's Day a year ago, makes his start on Father's Day today, and just shows out once again with the 15 strikeouts and 6 1/3 innings. Outstanding from him. But you're starting to see the pieces of this rotation come together because you've also got Spencer Strider pitching at a high level over the weekend against the Rockies. Has to have you encouraged about the steps he can take moving forward. Then you got Chris Sale and Spencer Schwellenbach. So this rotation, that starting 4 is pretty solid. Bryce Elder has pitched well for the most part, and if he's your 5th, I think you're doing okay in that regard. But when you think about what the Braves might go out and try to get, maybe try to add another starter. But I'm just going to continue to say this because this is the case. The pitching is not the problem. You can continue to add pitchers, and you probably should because, as history has shown us, you can never have too much of that. But they're going to have to figure out ways to score runs. That ultimately is the major deal. Now, we talked a little bit about one-run games and close games and things that haven't gone the Braves' way this year. And in the midst of all of that, it's not just the inability to score runs on a regular basis, but it's also some of the struggles that you've seen in the bullpen, none more so than Raisel Iglesias. Now, he has looked good his last couple of times out. You might have noticed he scrapped the slider. He stopped throwing that on a regular basis. That was the pitch that he was having trouble keeping in the ballpark. But he also had this, I would say, kind of tough adjustment period as he was going through trying to, I think, refine his pitch mix. And also, I mean, you got to have some pretty rough confidence when you have a run like he did from basically early May into early June. 11 games for Iglesias, 20 hits in 10 innings. He also walked 4 guys, gave up 11 earned runs, had an ERA just south of 10. His last couple of outings, he has looked like the vintage Raisel Iglesias. Low pitch count, working quickly, throwing strikes, couple of scoreless frames. I know it's not a lot, but you're starting to see him trending in that right direction. And I've said this before, and I will continue to say this. Even if the Braves go out and get bullpen help, even if some other guys start to step up and show you they can pitch in high leverage, you need Raisel Iglesias to get right. He still has a role to play for this team, and I think it's going to be an important one. So that is what is going on with the Atlanta Braves this week. One more look at the schedule, though, as we close out here. You got the 3-game series with the Mets that is coming up beginning on Tuesday. Then you will head to Miami for 3, and then the New York Mets for 4 more games, and then 3 more with the Phillies before the next off day. So a very busy couple of weeks for the Atlanta Braves. Pivotal couple of weeks as well. Want to thank Mike Ferrin for joining me from MLB Network Radio. Want to thank my dad for joining me here on Father's Day to chat a little bit of baseball. And thank all of you for listening to From the Diamond, as you always do, each and every Sunday. Also want to thank my producer, Eric Slaughter, for the great work as well, keeping things on the tracks here. And we will join you next Sunday right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. And until then, so long, everyone.